Man, I never imagined I'd find myself one of those guys spilling his life story on Reddit. Yet here I am. I've been married to Jessica for 6 years. And if I'm being honest, I always had a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that our relationship wouldn't remain perfect indefinitely. But I certainly didn't anticipate it would deteriorate this much. The last 2 years have been an absolute nightmare. And I'll just say it, trust was the first casualty. It's kind of ironic because, in the beginning, everything seemed perfectly normal. Sure, we had our share of ups and downs, but who doesn't? We even discussed the possibility of having kids someday, maybe buying a house, just the whole settling down routine. But all that changed when Jessica's mom decided to remarry. That's when Megan came back into our lives. To give you some context, a few years back, Jessica's mom tied the knot with some guy. And with him came Megan, her new stepsister. Now, Megan isn't just some random woman popping in and out of our lives. She and Jessica actually went to high school together. And let me tell you, back in the day, they absolutely despised each other. Jessica would rant about how Megan was this manipulative, conniving little brat who was always trying to one-up her. Apparently, Megan had a talent for smiling sweetly while plotting against you behind your back. Jessica always felt like they were in a constant competition. Grades, boys, friends, whatever it was a race to the finish. Honestly, I used to chalk it up to typical high school drama. Teenage girls can be vicious to one another. When Megan first started showing up more often, I didn't think too much of it. She came by frequently, mostly to visit her mom, but naturally Jessica couldn't stand it. Each time Megan appeared, Jessica would become tense and defensive. Initially, I didn't see what the big deal was. Megan seemed decent enough to me. Friendly, maybe a bit too direct, but nothing too outrageous. I even got along with her, which, as it turned out, became the real issue. I'll admit, Megan did flirt with me a little. Nothing outrageous, just some lighthearted comments now and then, maybe a teasing smile or two. She was attractive, I won't lie about that, but I never took it seriously. It felt like harmless teasing, you know? But Jessica? She blew everything way out of proportion. It was as if every little thing Megan did or said was a personal affront to her. And gradually, that jealousy morphed into a full-blown obsession. I would catch Jessica shooting me daggers if I so much as glanced in Megan's direction. And the arguments? They were relentless. She'd accuse me of giving Megan too much attention or being too friendly with her. Every time Megan left, Jessica and I would end up bickering. It didn't help that Megan had a knack for pushing Jessica's buttons. She seemed to know just how to get under Jessica's skin, and sometimes I think she did it intentionally. I recall one evening when Jessica was so furious after Megan joined us for dinner that she smashed a glass right in front of me. She was yelling about how I was always staring at her, and insinuating that I clearly found Megan more attractive than her. I tried to calm her down, but it was futile. No matter what I said, we always circled back to Megan. I should have noticed the warning signs earlier. Jessica had always had that competitive streak with Megan, even before all this. She used to share stories about how she would go out of her way to embarrass Megan in school, making her look foolish in front of their friends. I suppose that rivalry never truly faded. It only intensified. Eventually, I started dreading Megan's visits. I knew they would lead to more accusations and fights. Jessica couldn't let it go, and honestly, I was growing weary of it all. I found myself trying to avoid any interaction with Megan when she was around, just to prevent Jessica from losing her mind. But of course, even that tactic backfired. Jessica would accuse me of acting strange or being distant whenever Megan was there, as if I were hiding something. It felt like there was no way to win. Looking back, it's clear just how twisted the situation became. Jessica's jealousy had nothing to do with Megan. It was about control. She wanted to be the one in charge, the one who had my undivided attention at all times, and Megan's presence threw her off balance. To her, Megan was a threat, and I found myself trapped in the middle of their toxic sibling rivalry. What really stung was that Jessica wasn't merely jealous. She was consumed by the need to prove she was superior to Megan. It was as if she needed to constantly remind me, and perhaps herself, that she was the one who won. She was the one who snagged the guy, not Megan. Instead of focusing on our marriage, she channeled all her energy into tearing Megan down. Things escalated when Megan began dropping by more frequently. Jessica accused me of flirting with her, even though I was doing everything in my power to limit any interaction. The more Jessica pushed, the more estranged we grew, and that's when I grasped a harsh truth. Our marriage had shifted from love and trust to a battle of wills. With every visit from Megan, I could see the fissures in our marriage expanding. Jessica would explode over the tiniest things: if I smiled at Megan, if I talked to her for too long, or even if I merely glanced her way. It felt like I was tiptoeing around a minefield. I couldn't say or do anything without Jessica jumping to the worst conclusions. Eventually, I gave up trying to defend myself. What was the point? Jessica had already made her choice. She didn't trust me, and no matter what I did, I couldn't alter that perception. The sad reality was, I hadn't done anything wrong. Sure, I got along with Megan, but my feelings for her were purely platonic. Yet in Jessica's mind, I was guilty from the get-go. You could say that marked the beginning of the end for us. Those arguments about Megan, the relentless accusations, and the jealousy, it was slowly eroding our marriage. And as much as I wished to mend things, deep down, I knew Jessica wasn't interested in fixing anything. She just wanted to be right. So, things didn't magically improve after all those fights about Megan. If anything, they spiraled even further downhill. Jessica, in her relentless pursuit to prove some nonsensical point, resorted to playing these ridiculous, childish games. At this stage, I was left wondering what exactly she hoped to achieve, but it felt like I was just being dragged along for the ride without any say. It all started off innocently enough, like many troublesome situations do. One evening, I came home from work to find a bouquet of roses sitting on the kitchen counter. Jessica was off in another room, so I casually asked her, "What's up with the flowers?" She sauntered in, wearing a smug grin and a fake smile that could convince no one. "Oh, just a little something from someone who appreciates me," she replied, her voice thick with that passive-aggressive undertone that I had grown all too familiar with. I didn't even blink. Honestly, after everything we'd endured together, I knew exactly what she was trying to do. She wanted to provoke me, to make me feel jealous and think that some guy was after her, all while I was expected to feel insecure. But all I felt was sheer exhaustion. Exhausted from the games, the mind games, and the endless need to compete with me, Megan, or whoever else was on her mental roster. So, I refused to take the bait. I simply shrugged and said, "That's nice," before going about my business as if it didn't matter. Because in the grand scheme of things, it really didn't. But Jessica wasn't the type to just let things lie. No, once she realized I wasn't going to fall for her little stunt, she escalated the situation. She began dropping vague hints about a new man in her life, as if I should actually believe she was seeing someone. She would leave random notes lying around the house, supposedly from this mystery admirer, and casually mention how someone at work had been paying her a lot of attention. Honestly, it was downright pathetic. I could see right through it. I mean, who writes anonymous notes for their husband to find in their own home? It was as if she were living in a high school soap opera, expecting me to play along. But I wasn't playing her game. I refused to give her the satisfaction. Each time she would drop one of those clues, I'd just smile and nod, acting as if it didn't bother me in the slightest. Because truthfully, it didn't. I knew she wasn't actually seeing anyone. This wasn't about her having an affair. It was all about her trying to mess with my head. She wanted to stoke my jealousy, to provoke a reaction, to make me scramble for her attention, whatever convoluted game she was playing. But I was determined not to fall into that trap. Naturally, Jessica wasn't one to give up easily. When the flowers and notes didn't provoke the response she was after, she opted for the nuclear option. Out of the blue one day, I received a text from her, a picture of her kissing some guy, Ethan, one of her co-workers. The caption simply read, "Thought you should know." Now, you'd think I'd go off the deep end over something like that. I mean, if your wife sends you a picture of herself kissing another man, the normal reaction would be to freak out, right? But when I laid eyes on that image, all I felt was numb. I had no clue who Ethan was, but from the way they were posing, I could tell it was all a charade. The kiss looked staged and awkward, as if they were posing for a photo rather than sharing a genuine moment. I found myself staring at my phone, and the only thought running through my mind was, how did we even get to this point? This was my wife, the woman I had committed my life to, and here she was engaging in these ridiculous games to provoke me. It was no longer about love. It was all about power, control, and her desperate need to feel superior. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I didn't react. I didn't reply. I simply set my phone down and took a walk, needing to clear my head. I knew confronting Ethan would lead nowhere. He was likely just a pawn in Jessica's twisted game, and if I exploded with anger, I'd only end up looking like the villain. The real issue wasn't Ethan. It was Jessica. She was the mastermind behind this chaos, and I needed to figure out how to deal with her. As I walked, I reflected on all the times I'd tried to salvage our marriage. We'd gone to counseling and had those long, excruciating talks about working on things, but it never seemed to make a difference. Jessica was not interested in mending anything. She just wanted to perpetuate the cycle. Argue, reconcile, and argue again, always keeping me on edge and making me feel like I was the problem. I'll admit, for a while, I thought I was the source of our issues. I figured that if I tried harder, paid more attention, or met her needs, everything would get better. But they never did, because it was never about me. It was always about her. There were countless moments in our marriage when Jessica manipulated me using these same tactics. She played the jealousy card, accused me of being indifferent, and twisted everything around to make me feel guilty. I remember one instance, one I'll never forget, when we were fighting over something trivial, likely Megan, and she suddenly burst into tears. She sobbed about how I didn't love her anymore, how I wasn't the man she married, how it was all my fault. And like an absolute fool, I believed her. I spent the remainder of that night apologizing and trying to make amends when, in reality, she was just pulling my strings. Looking back now, it's painfully obvious. I can see all the times she weaponized my emotions against me, making me feel guilty for things that weren't even my fault. And this entire secret admirer charade, this kiss with Ethan, it was just another one of her twisted schemes designed to make me feel worthless. But I wasn't about to let Jessica win this time. I refused to fall for her mind games. Not anymore. When I got home, I didn't utter a single word about the picture. I didn't ask her a thing about Ethan. I simply acted as if nothing had happened at all. I could see it was driving her up the wall, waiting for me to explode, to confront her, to scream and shout. But I denied her that satisfaction. I wasn't playing her game any longer. Jessica tried to bait me a few more times after that. She'd casually drop Ethan's name in a conversation or make vague comments about their dates, but I brushed it off. I knew the truth. I understood that whatever was happening between them was nothing more than a charade. It was just her desperate attempt to rattle me, to make me feel as though I was on the verge of losing her. But in reality, I had already lost her. Maybe I never really had her in the first place. After that photo of Jessica kissing Ethan, I was on the brink of a breakdown. I always believed I had a pretty good grip on my temper, but this situation, it pushed me to my limits. I was furious, yes, but it was more than just anger. It was the betrayal, the manipulation, the sheer audacity of Jessica pulling a stunt like that. She had transformed what was already a sinking ship of a marriage into something far worse, some sick, twisted game. I wanted to scream at her, demand to know why she thought this was acceptable. But the more I contemplated it, the more I realized that confronting her would change absolutely nothing. Going after Ethan? That would have been a complete waste of time. It didn't take a genius to see he had no idea what he was stepping into. I didn't know him personally, but from what I'd heard, he seemed harmless, a typical guy just trying to navigate life. If anything, Ethan was merely a pawn in Jessica's game. The real issue wasn't him. It was her. And by then, I had learned better than to dance to her tune. So, instead of spiraling into rage, I did something that even surprised me. I reached out to Megan. Yeah, I know. Of all people, Megan. But I was desperate and needed someone to talk to who wouldn't hit me with some cliché marriage takes work nonsense. Megan was the only person who truly understood Jessica for who she was. Manipulative, controlling, and capable of being downright cruel when the mood struck her. I figured if anyone would grasp what I was going through, it would be her. I called Megan without any formalities or small talk. I dove straight into the mess. Megan, I need to talk. Jessica pulled some serious bullshit this time. It didn't take long for her to reply. "Come over. I'm free." In less than 20 minutes, I was seated on her couch, my hands trembling with frustration as I laid everything out. The flowers, the ridiculous notes, the picture of Jessica kissing Ethan, every detail. And you know what? She didn't even seem surprised. If anything, she appeared amused. Megan leaned back in her chair, almost smiling. "I can't say I'm shocked. Jessica has always been like this. She just knows how to hide it better from most people." The way she said it sent chills down my spine, as if she had anticipated this moment all along. I expected her to offer some sympathy or understanding, but instead, she threw me a curveball that hit me like a ton of bricks. "You should sleep with me," she said, completely unfazed. At first, I thought she was joking. I even chuckled a bit, thinking she was trying to lighten the mood. But when I met her gaze, calm and dead serious, I realized she was completely sincere. "Wait, what?" I replied, unsure if I had heard her correctly. She smiled, as if it was the most rational suggestion in the world. "You heard me. If Jessica wants to play these games, why not give her a taste of her own medicine? She cheats on you with Ethan. You sleep with me. Fair's fair, right?" I was taken aback. Sure, Megan had always been a little flirtatious, but this was an entirely different ballgame. My mind was racing, and I couldn't believe she was proposing such a thing. Yet, there was this darker part of me, this furious, vengeful part, that wanted to accept her offer. It would have been so easy. Too easy, really, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I can't. That's not who I am." Megan didn't even flinch. She simply shrugged, as if to say, "Suit yourself." But there was something in her eyes, a glint that told me she wasn't surprised by my refusal. Maybe that was her intention all along, to see how far I was willing to go. As we continued to talk, it became increasingly clear that Megan wasn't just an innocent bystander in this drama. She had her own motives, her own reasons for wanting to see Jessica suffer. She'd been harboring a grudge for years, since high school, in fact, and she was more than willing to watch Jessica's life unravel. She wasn't just a stepsister. She was a woman with her own agenda. "You know," Megan said, her voice almost teasing, "Jessica has always been like this. Even back in school, she did everything she could to make my life a nightmare. Spreading rumors, humiliating me in front of our peers, ensuring I was always overshadowed by her. She's always craved the spotlight, always needed to feel like she was winning. It's honestly pathetic." I nodded, absorbing her words. While I knew Jessica had issues with Megan, hearing it from Megan's perspective was eye-opening. It was clear Megan had been waiting for this moment, anticipating the opportunity to strike back. And I had just handed her the perfect chance. "I won't sugarcoat it," Megan continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I've always found you somewhat attractive, Jason. And the idea of getting back at Jessica? It's tempting, isn't it?" I was at a loss for words. Here was Megan, someone who had been part of my life for years, suddenly putting herself on the table as some sort of revenge prize. But I couldn't do that. I wasn't that kind of guy. No matter how much I loathed Jessica for her betrayal, sleeping with Megan would have been a line I couldn't uncross. "I appreciate your honesty," I finally said after a moment of silence. "But it's not the solution." Megan studied me for a long moment, her eyes probing mine, searching for something, maybe vulnerability or desperation. But when she realized I wasn't about to yield, she sighed and leaned back. "Suit yourself," she replied, but this time, there was a hint of disappointment lacing her tone. I understood then that Megan wasn't merely offering me a chance at revenge. She was seizing the opportunity to settle her own scores with Jessica. This wasn't about me. It was about her, and I refused to be used as a pawn in their twisted sibling rivalry. Still, that conversation lingered in my mind. The way Megan talked about Jessica, the way she casually suggested I betray my wife the same way Jessica had betrayed me. It was a stark reminder of how deeply entrenched this whole situation was. This wasn't just a marital spat. It was something far more sinister, rooted in years of resentment and bitterness. When I left Megan's place that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, Or maybe it was the realization that my marriage was irreparably broken. Whatever it was, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. I had always prided myself on being the bigger person, on holding on to my principles even when everything around me was crumbling. But now I was questioning whether those principles held any weight when surrounded by people who clearly didn't care about them. As I walked home, I couldn't help but ponder what Megan had suggested. Was revenge truly the answer? Would sleeping with her alleviate my pain? Or would it only deepen the wounds? One thing was abundantly clear. Jessica had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. While I didn't accept Megan's proposition, the seed of revenge had already been planted. Whether I liked it or not, it was only a matter of time before it took root. When I arrived home after my conversation with Megan, I knew I had to confront Jessica. There was no avoiding it any longer. I needed to understand if she even grasped the extent of her actions, or if she had descended too far into her self-absorbed world to care. The atmosphere in the house was thick with tension, nearly suffocating. There she was, sprawled on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through her phone as if nothing had changed. It was like she didn't even notice I had walked in. "We need to talk," I said, attempting to keep my voice steady. I wasn't entirely sure how to start this conversation, but I knew it was long overdue. Jessica didn't even glance up. "What now, Jason?" I swallowed hard, searching for the right words. "Do you even realize how much you've hurt me? What you've done to us?" Finally, she looked up, her expression cold and devoid of feeling. "Hurt you? You're the one who's ruined everything. You're the reason my life is miserable." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there, stunned, trying to process what she'd just said. "Wait, what? You honestly believe this is my fault?" She rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Of course it's your fault, Jason. You trapped me in this boring, pathetic life. Do you really think I wanted this?" I felt anger bubbling up inside me, but I fought to remain calm. "We built this life together, Jessica. I thought we were happy. What happened to you? What happened to me? I woke up. That's what happened. I realized I was wasting my time with you, stuck in this dead-end marriage." "I deserve more," she snapped, not a shred of remorse in her voice. I stared at her, barely able to fathom what I was hearing. This wasn't the Jessica I had fallen in love with, the woman I had married. That version of her was gone, replaced by someone cold and self-centered. "So what? You think sending me those pictures with Ethan was supposed to fix things? You think hurting me is the solution?" She simply shrugged, as if it were inconsequential. "I didn't force you to stay, Jason. You're the one who chose to stick around. You're the one too afraid to leave." I couldn't believe it. She wasn't just refusing to take responsibility. She was rewriting history. All the fights, all the manipulation. It was as if she had convinced herself that I was the problem all along. I couldn't take it anymore. "You really don't care, do you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "You don't care about me, about us, about anything we built together." Jessica didn't flinch. "I stopped caring a long time ago, Jason. You're just the last one to figure it out." Her words felt like a final nail in the coffin. All the hope I had been clinging to, the hope that maybe, somehow, we could salvage this, faded away. It was over. She didn't care, and she never would. "I don't even recognize you anymore," I said quietly. "This isn't the woman I married." She let out a bitter laugh. "The woman you married? That version of me is long gone, Jason. She vanished ages ago, and you were too blind to notice." I tried to take a deep breath, but it felt like I was suffocating. Each word she uttered was a fresh wound, a stark reminder that the life we had built together was crumbling, leaving nothing worth salvaging. "What happened to us?" I asked, almost as if I were speaking to myself. I could hardly recall the last time things felt right between us, the last moment we shared genuine happiness. My thoughts drifted back to our honeymoon, the laughter, the dreams of a bright future together. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else, from a time long lost. She remained silent. She didn't need to respond. Her lack of words spoke volumes. Then, out of the blue, she brought up Megan. "You know, I've always suspected you were more interested in her than me," Jessica said, her tone disturbingly casual, as if it were a given. "Even from the start, you gave her more attention than you ever gave me. Don't think I didn't notice." I was taken aback. Wait, Megan, you honestly believe this is about her? She sneered at me. Of course it is. You've always given her more of your time and energy. That's why I started seeing Ethan. Because you were never fully present, Jason. You were always halfway out the door, chasing after her. I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. You seriously think my unhappiness stems from Megan? Jessica, this isn't about her at all. It's about us. You've been playing games and pushing me away for months, and now you want to blame someone else? Blame someone else? She scoffed. You've always shifted the blame onto me. I'm done being the scapegoat for your failures. In that moment, I knew, truly knew, that our marriage was over. There was no saving it, no fixing what had been broken. Jessica was gone. The woman I had once loved, the woman I thought I knew, had been replaced by a stranger, cold and self-absorbed, who seemed indifferent to the chaos she had caused. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice steady yet resolute. I'm done. She barely looked up from her phone. Good. So am I. And just like that, there was no emotion, no regret, only a chilling indifference. I felt an overwhelming sense of loss, not just for the marriage, but for the life we had envisioned together, the person I once believed Jessica to be. But perhaps that person had never truly existed. Without saying another word, I headed upstairs to pack a bag. It felt surreal, as though I were witnessing someone else's life unravel. Deep down, I understood there was no turning back. This was the end. As I walked out the door, I refused to look back. After my conversation with Jessica, I was engulfed in frustration. It wasn't merely anger over her refusal to apologize or accept responsibility. It was everything. The years of manipulation, the incessant jealousy, the blame she placed squarely on me for our shattered marriage. It all came crashing down. I felt hollow, devoid of answers. No marriage, no resolution, just a tangled mess of emotions I couldn't shake. And that's when my thoughts drifted back to Megan. I knew I shouldn't even consider it. I knew it was the wrong choice, the kind of decision that would lead to immediate regret. But in that moment, I didn't care. I craved revenge. I wanted to hurt Jessica the way she had hurt me, to show her that I wasn't some pushover she could walk all over. So, I made a choice I never thought I would. I went back to Megan. That night, I drove to her place. My heart raced, a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and something darker swirling within me. Megan opened the door, surprised to see me, but she didn't ask any questions. The look on my face must have revealed everything. Jason, she said, her voice low and curious. What brings you here? I didn't bother with niceties. I stepped inside, and the words spilled out before I could stop them. You were right about what you said. I want to do it. I want to sleep with you. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise, but then a slow, satisfied smile crept across her face. She understood exactly what this meant. For her, this was a victory over Jessica, over the years of rivalry and bitterness that had lingered between them. And now, here I was, ready to give her exactly what she desired. You sure about this? She asked, though the glint in her eyes told me she wasn't worried about my answer. I nodded, the weight of everything propelling me forward. Yeah, I'm sure. The next few moments felt like a blur. I remember the way Megan looked at me, the way she kissed me with an intensity that felt more like possession than passion. This wasn't about love. It was about revenge for both of us. She wanted to get back at Jessica just as much as I did, and we both knew this would cut deep. The sex was mechanical. There was no real connection or intimacy. It felt like an act, purely physical, but filled with the weight of everything that had brought us to this moment. I can't even say it felt good. It just felt like something I had to do. Like I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't weak, that I wouldn't let Jessica's betrayal be the final chapter in our marriage. When it was over, I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange mix of relief and disgust. Relief because I had reclaimed some control over my life, over the situation. Disgust because I knew, deep down, this wasn't who I wanted to be. But it was too late to turn back now. Megan, on the other hand, appeared utterly pleased with herself. She lay next to me, her fingers tracing patterns across my chest, a self-satisfied grin on her face. I sensed a shift in her demeanor. This wasn't just a one-off encounter for her. She seemed to believe this was the beginning of something. "You know," she said after a moment, "I could be a far better wife to you than Jessica ever was." I turned to look at her, taken aback by the boldness of her statement. "What do you mean?" She smiled again, that same smug expression lighting up her features. "I'm serious. Jessica never valued you. She never truly cared about you like I do. You deserve someone who actually appreciates you, Jason." I was at a loss for words. Her comments hung in the air, making me uneasy. This wasn't what I had signed up for. I came here seeking revenge, not to embark on a new relationship with my wife's stepsister. But it was clear Megan had different plans. "You and I, we could really click," she continued, her voice soft and enticing. "We're both free now. We both want the same thing." I shook my head, sitting up and creating distance between us. "Megan, this isn't what I want." She looked puzzled, as if my response had blindsided her. "What do you mean?" "I don't know what I thought," I interrupted, running a hand through my hair, trying to gather my scattered thoughts. Everything, it's a mess. I'm not looking for a new relationship. I'm just trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing." Megan's expression fell, but she quickly regained her composure, sitting up beside me. "Jason, I understand, but you can't honestly tell me you don't feel a bit better after this. You got back at Jessica. You took control. Isn't that what you wanted?" I couldn't provide an answer. A part of me did feel lighter. It felt like I had exacted some form of revenge on Jessica, that I had proven I wasn't the only one willing to break the rules. But another part of me felt empty, as if I had crossed an irreversible line. "I don't know," I confessed quietly. I really don't know." Megan reached out, touching my arm gently, her voice softening. "Jason, it's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. But you deserve to be happy. You deserve more than what Jessica has given you." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, grappling with everything that had transpired. I stood up and began putting my clothes back on, feeling the weight of my actions settle over me like a heavy shroud. "I should go," I muttered. Megan watched me with a mixture of disappointment and understanding in her eyes. "If you need anything, you know where to find me." I didn't reply. I couldn't. I simply walked out the door, my mind spinning. As I drove home, I felt a strange sense of relief, as though I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. But alongside that relief was a darker feeling, guilt, perhaps even regret, gnawing at the corners of my mind. Was this really what I wanted? Was revenge sufficient to fill the void Jessica had left behind? Or had I just made everything worse? When I pulled into my driveway, one truth was unmistakable. There was no turning back. I had set something in motion, and I had no idea where it would lead me. After that night with Megan, I felt an unusual kind of relief. It wasn't the kind that follows a good deed. It felt more like finally shedding a heavy burden. I didn't feel proud of myself or even satisfied, but I did feel like I had taken back some semblance of control. It was messy, sure, but after all that Jessica had put me through, I believed I deserved at least this small victory. Yet deep down, I knew that sleeping with Megan hadn't resolved anything. In fact, it had likely complicated matters even further. There was no future with Megan. That much was obvious. It wasn't about her at all. It had always been about Jessica. After enduring years of her games, her manipulation, and her refusal to take responsibility for her actions, I recognized that I needed to end this once and for all. I couldn't continue living in this toxic web of lies and provocation. So, I made a decision. I was going to confront Jessica with the truth about Megan, about everything. No more games. No more deception. The next morning, I entered the kitchen where Jessica sat sipping her coffee, seemingly unfazed by the storm that had just passed through our lives. The usual tension lingered in the air, but this time, it felt different. I sensed an end point approaching, and I was ready to face it. "We need to talk," I stated, attempting to keep my voice steady, even though my heart raced. I wasn't certain how she would react, but I knew it was going to be a difficult conversation. She glanced up, her eyes narrowing. "What now?" I took a deep breath, bracing myself. "I slept with Megan." For a moment, silence enveloped us. Jessica froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Her eyes widened, disbelief washing over her face. She stared at me as if struggling to comprehend my words. Then, slowly, her expression morphed, disbelief shifted to shock, and then into fury. "You what?" she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "I slept with Megan," I stated firmly, my voice unwavering. "After everything you've done, after all your games, I went through with it." Jessica leaped to her feet, so suddenly that her chair toppled over, clattering to the floor. Her face flushed with anger, her hands trembling as fury bubbled within her. "You disgusting, pathetic piece of shit. You actually slept with her? My stepsister? The one person I've always despised?" I watched as her rage intensified, her hands balling into fists, as if she was ready to lash out. "You really are the lowest of the low, Jason. The absolute lowest." I remained composed, observing her unravel before me. I had expected this reaction, yet witnessing it unfold was unsettling. Jessica was furious, beyond furious, and all that anger was directed at me. But this time, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. I didn't see myself as the villain. I simply felt done. "You did this for revenge, didn't you?" she yelled, her voice cracking with emotion. "You slept with her just to get back at me. How could you be so cruel?" I didn't shy away from the truth. "Yes, it was revenge, Jessica. I'm not proud of it, but after everything you've put me through, I had to take a stand." Her eyes sparked with pure hatred. "You bastard," she spat. "How could you sink so low? After all I've endured, your obsession with Megan, your constant attention to her, I should have seen this betrayal coming." Now I was furious. "My obsession with Megan? Are you serious? You're the one who turned our marriage into a circus. You've played games, trying to make me jealous, pushing me away. You were the one who started seeing Ethan. I tried everything to fix this, Jessica, but you never cared. You never wanted to work on our relationship. You just wanted to be right. You destroyed this marriage long before I ever slept with Megan." For a brief moment, Jessica looked stunned, as if the weight of reality had finally hit her. But then her demeanor shifted, growing defensive. "I only started seeing Ethan because of how you treated me. You made me feel worthless, Jason. Like I was just second best in your life. Always behind Megan." "That's complete nonsense," I shot back. "You pushed me into this. You've been manipulating me for years, trying to make me feel guilty, using every trick to control me. You wanted to break me, Jessica. Well, congratulations, you finally got what you wanted." Her face contorted with rage, and for a fleeting second, I feared she might strike me. But instead, she took a step back, her voice quaking with fury. "You're a monster, Jason. An absolute monster. I'm filing for divorce." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me amidst her outburst. "Fine, go ahead. But don't you dare try to put all the blame on me. You played your part in this disaster too." Jessica glared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she fought for composure. I could see the hurt in her eyes, the betrayal hitting hard. But there was also something else, a flicker of realization. Deep down, she knew she had pushed me to this point. She had tested me, taunted me, and now she was facing the consequences of her actions. With one last look of disgust, she turned and stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. The sound reverberated through the house, but this time it didn't bother me. I felt liberated. For the first time in years, I could breathe again. A week later, Jessica filed for divorce. In her attempts to rewrite the narrative, she tried to paint herself as the victim, blaming me for everything. But this time I didn't care. Let her spin whatever tale she needed to. I knew the truth, and so did she. Her relationship with Megan was in ruins. Not only had she lost me, but she had also lost her stepsister. Ultimately, she had no one to blame but herself. As for me, I began to piece my life back together. It wasn't easy, and I won't pretend there weren't moments of doubt, times when I questioned whether I had gone too far with Megan. But deep down, I understood that I had made the right choice. This wasn't about physicality. It was about reclaiming control and ending Jessica's manipulations once and for all. I'm not proud of every decision I made, but I won't feel ashamed either. I did what I needed to do to survive, to escape a toxic marriage that had suffocated me for far too long. Now, I'm focused on what lies ahead. I'm free from the lies, the jealousy, and the endless strife. I have a long road ahead, but for the first time in ages, I feel like I'm heading in the right direction. And when I do enter a new relationship, it will be with someone who respects me, someone who values trust over manipulation. The past is behind me, and now I'm finally ready to move forward.